Donald Trump has long mocked those who invoke their Fifth Amendment rights in legal proceedings, including comparing them to the mob.
When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth, so they're not prosecuted.
Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Horrible.
Her staffers taking the Fifth Amendment. How about that? So they have 5 people taking the Fifth Amendment, like you see on the mob, right? You see the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
So today was Mr. America First pleading the Fifth, when Trump chose not to give up his right against self-incrimination as he was set to testify under oath for a deposition in a civil case brought by New York State Attorney General Letitia James. Trump released a statement saying, quote, "I once asked, if you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? Now I know the answer to that question. When your family, your company, and all the people in your orbit have become the targets of an unfounded, politically motivated witch hunt supported by lawyers, prosecutors, and the fake news media, you have no choice." So-called witch hunt he is referring to is the civil suit James has been considering filing against the former president and his real estate company, alleging that he inflated the value of his assets by hundreds of millions of dollars for tax purposes. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. Following their meeting, the Attorney General's office released a statement confirming that Trump had actually pled the Fifth and added, quote, "Attorney General James will pursue the facts and the law wherever they may lead. Our investigation continues." Joining me now is Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and an MSNBC political analyst, and Tristan Snell, former assistant attorney general for the state of New York. Thank you so much. Tristan, I'll start with you. Not a lawyer. I always say this. When I hear somebody plead the Fifth, I basically hear face it, not guilty. That's how I stay filthy, right? Like that's somebody's way of getting out of any sort of responsibility whatsoever. Legally, what does it actually mean to plead the Fifth in this kind of investigation?
Well, the key here is that this is a civil investigation, a civil prosecution, not a criminal one. In a criminal case, if you plead the Fifth, you can't actually say that that means the person was guilty. In a civil case, you can then draw the inference, as it's referred to, that the person is liable of the conduct that they're being alleged of doing. So in this case, the court is going to be able to say, well, anything that he took the Fifth on is something that we can say that that was evidence of his liability.
So, Tim, this is another part of this that always gets me. We know that Trump is a liar. We know that he isn't reliable in any sort of context one way or another. But I've always wondered if, from the perspective of Trump world, if this is actually the case that gives him the most heartburn. This is the one that has him up eating stale hamburgers at night, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen with January 6th. We don't know what's going to happen in any other investigations. But these financial crimes are the kinds of things that people do actually get in trouble for. Do you think that this is a turning point? Him having to come in and plead the Fifth is a turning point in a case that might actually concern Trump world?
Jason, I just want you to repeat taking the Fifth in that high tone again. I'd love to use that as a ringtone on my phone or something. I cannot hit that note. I was impressed by that. I think Tish James has a very high bar in this case. She has to prove that Trump knowingly misled his lenders and knowingly misled tax collectors when he represented the valuations of various properties. That will really hinge on the kind of evidence she has and whether or not she can prove intent. Again, that's a very high hurdle. She also has to prove, I think, in the case of the banks, that very sophisticated lenders were duped by Donald Trump, that they didn't do their own due diligence when he made claims to them about how much his properties are worth. I think there's a different standard with tax collectors. I don't think you should assume that the tax collector has the same kind of sophistication as a bank, and it might have been easier for Trump to dupe them. So it could break along those lines. It is no surprise that he took the Fifth multiple times because Donald Trump is a lawyer's worst nightmare under deposition. He's a habitual liar. He exaggerates. He embellishes. He doesn't stay on script. No lawyer really wants to put someone like that under oath because basically it's a time bomb. When I litigated with Trump in my case and we deposed him for 2 days, 8 hours a day. During those 16 hours of deposition, our lawyers caught him in more than 30 lies. claims he had made in the past that were completely false on a wide variety of topics, including everything from how much he got paid to give speeches to more material things like the value he placed on the sale of condominiums and other items. So in that context, not surprising. I do think it's a turning point that he took the fifth. I don't know in terms of a turning point. I think what this represents is that Tish James is near the end of her investigation. And I think she's going to have to make a decision now about whether or not to indict him. So I think we're about to get clarity on where this case is headed.
Tristan, with that in mind, we have some details of the deposition from an attorney. Donald Trump, he answered one question. His name. And frankly, I can imagine he lied about that. I mean, he did at one point. That was one of his biographies mentioned it. He read a statement where he called the inquiry the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. He accused A.G. James of openly campaigning on a policy of destroying me. This is the thing, Tristan. Look, lawyers and investigators are people, too. Do you think this kind of antagonism actually inspires and motivates these people to be even more aggressive in their investigation? I mean, look, if somebody comes in and is constantly yelling at you, that probably makes them even more dedicated to this. Or do you think that they are stone cold robots? They're, outside of Buckingham Palace. They're unmoved by this, and that this campaign and this investigation will continue regardless of how aggressive Trump is with them during the investigation?
It's a little bit of both. I wouldn't say aggressive. I would say dedicated. I would say determined. When you get, and we had this in the Trump University matter, when you get them coming at you like this, it just turns you into that kind of stone-cold robot outside of Buckingham Palace. It turns you into Winston frickin' Churchill is what it does. Like, you're just going to stand tough, and you're going to be a bulldog, and you're not going to let go because you can't let them move you off your blocks. So, the more that he does something like this, it's not going to make things better for him. I don't think it's going to cause the AG's office to get overly aggressive. I think it's going to cause them to say, nope, we're going to stand our ground. And one thing I would note here is that this is actually a civil case. Under Executive Law 6312 is likely we don't have the papers yet, but that's what is likely going to get brought here, that this is a civil investigation. They do not need to prove knowing conduct. They do not need to prove intent, and they do not need to prove that the lenders reasonably relied on the misrepresentations. Those are the standards for common law fraud. So we don't know this 100% for sure, but there's a high probability. I used to work on the civil prosecution side at the AG's office. That's 6312 is what we brought Trump University under. It's a different standard that the AG has to meet here, and it's not nearly as high as it would be for a criminal case. So that is something that's very much working in the AG's office favor here. I think they're going to stand their ground, keep it moving, and I think that they just got exactly what they were looking for by deposing Trump.
And Tristan, quickly, another point from Trump world. We've got Rudy Giuliani, who's basically trying to find any excuse he can to not show up to court down in Fulton County. His lawyers tried to say that, his recent heart issues were the reason he can't fly to Atlanta. And the judge said, look, unless you can provide me with a better medical excuse, I think Uber actually works on Highway 75. Do you think that look, we see this in mob movies all the time. People pretend that they've got mental illness. They pretend that they've got heart issues. Do you think this kind of thing is going to be common with Giuliani? Is he going to eventually have to come down, or do you think that the guy may, put himself in a home or claim that he has some sort of massive medical issue so he can avoid finally facing prosecution?
Rudy Giuliani is a riddle inside of Enigma, inside of a, gosh, who cares? Can someone just actually, get the guy to follow the law at some point here? Look, maybe Atlanta has a Four Seasons landscaping that he can go work out of and call his home base for a couple of weeks. He just needs to find a place down there that he can call his own, and, he can order some more hair dye. Look, the thing is that these excuses are excuses that judges hear all the time from sort of your two-bit criminals. Everybody always has the dog eat their homework. They're not going. The judges aren't stupid. This isn't their first rodeo. They're not going to fall for this kind of stuff. So when you come in saying the dog ate my indictment, or I can't come because my parakeet is sick, no one's going to care. No one's going to care. They're just going to say you need to come down.
They don't play that in Atlanta. Tim O'Brien and Tristan Stells, thank you so much for joining us tonight.